Hey readers, welcome to Read It Forward's very first book club discussion on Facebook Live. I'm Abby.
And I'm Erin.
And I'm Jess.
So we're so glad you guys are joining us to talk about our first ever book club pick, and we're talking about If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. So we all read this book and we all saw the movie. I don't know about you guys at home, but we were just talking about that this book was originally written in 1974, and there are definitely parts that feel relevant today and feel very dated. So, Erin, what did you think still feels relevant today?
I think the overall effects of poverty, unfortunately, are timeless in this country, in this entire world, especially being in the same city. You still have people struggling to find places to live, find adequate work, subway issues. All of that is really constant and seems to just kind of be a constant thing. So, like, having to kind of navigate life while being in intense poverty is a very real thing.
Yeah. Jess, what about you?
I thought that the experiences of like a young couple with a lot of things going against them was super relevant and relatable. I think that they were very young and very in love, but their families caused a lot of stink between them, and obviously Tish's pregnancy was another like rift, and I just think that their experiences, although happened a long time ago, were still like pretty relatable today.
One of the things that I think sadly is still really relevant is young black men being targeted by white police officers, being sent to jail for crimes they didn't commit. I think there are still major flaws in the justice system in this country today, which James Baldwin really illustrates beautifully. And another thing that I thought was so interesting, especially in the Me Too movement nowadays, is this idea surrounding sexual assault. There's a huge sexual assault that's sort of at the center, the core of
really
the story.
frames the whole story.
Exactly. And there's a question about believing women, and should we believe this woman who is accusing Fani?
Because you almost, it's weird because you almost want to dislike her, like when you're reading the book, because you know that Fani didn't do it, but you still feel for Victoria like a lot, like in the story, as you should.
Yeah, and say what you were saying about Ernestine.
Oh, I love Ernestine because she is my favorite. Just putting that out there now. I just remember a part that stuck out to me vividly was when she was speaking with Tish about the whole situation, and Tish, I think, asked her sister if she believed that Victoria was actually raped. And Ernestine was kind of like taken aback by that question that she even asked. She was like, of course, I believe she's been through something extremely traumatic. And I really loved that about her, because she didn't even doubt, for a second that this woman had been through something extremely difficult.
And she almost used that as sort of a way to point it back to the flawed justice system.
Yes.
Like, I don't doubt that she went through something traumatic, and I don't doubt that she said, yeah, that's the guy, to whomever they put in front of her. But it was like that whomever they put in front of her was totally flawed.
Right, exactly.
And I thought that vendetta from Officer Beale, who was like all the way across town when this supposedly happened.
He was terrible. Like, I hated him.
We hate Officer Beale.
Yeah. But we love the Italian woman who told him to go away.
Totally. So those are some things that still feel really, really relevant about this book today. But what are some things that felt dated as you were reading?
Yeah, so we were talking about just the roles of men and women. That obviously has changed, and marriage in general has changed. like we will get married older now.
Mm-hmm.
Tish is very young. That's it still happens, but it's not as heard of now. So that's definitely something that I think makes, I can't necessarily put myself in Tish's shoes, just because those aren't the choices that I've made, but it was common back then, and it's what people did.
Yeah.
So.
What about you?
Yeah, I definitely think the gender roles were a little dated in my opinion. You know, the woman belongs to a man situation where Tish kind of like was portrayed as belonging to her father at first, and then belonging to Fonny, and that felt a little dated to me for sure. And yeah, I just don't think that would be super relevant today.
Yeah, so I thought, everything you guys have said, it's definitely, it carries the sort of the yoke of the sort of racism in the 70s and the sexism and misogyny that was happening in the 70s in Baldwin's writing, I think, no doubt. But I do think we can sort of look past that, as you can do with any sort of historical piece of literature, and
you accept it. You're like, okay, this was written in this time, and
totally.
this is,
But I know some of you in our Facebook group had trouble sort of getting past that, so we totally get that.
And we were actually like speaking, and we were saying that it's also kind of crucial to realize that like this isn't necessarily coming from Baldwin's own point of view. He's almost doing like a study of a time, but I don't necessarily think that like this is how Baldwin views people, which I don't know if that's like because like that's kind of what a really good writer and storyteller has to do. Maybe they have to put themselves and write some really like terrible things to be able to accurately depict a true story or a story that like speaks truth. So
totally. Yeah, because Baldwin himself was fairly progressive as a thinker. He himself was a gay man, so I think, yes, exactly, like he's telling this story. He is the conduit through which these characters are coming to the page. So as you read, did you get a sense that the novel felt hopeful to you, or like not so hopeful?
I didn't see it as hopeful. I actually felt the opposite, because I just felt like there was injustice after injustice, and then the way that it ends leaves you kind of thinking that it will never be a happy ending for these people, that they will continue to experience things like this throughout their life. So it was pretty sad.
Yeah. Erin, what about you?
I did not feel it as hopeful, more that the family would continue to push forward, but not necessarily hopeful. I think I subconsciously will think of hope and a little bit of joy and happiness. And the way that this book ended, I didn't get there. So I definitely felt like their story wasn't over. So not that their story ended, and not that these characters were done, or characters like them and people like them are done, but I felt more this sense of like pushing through and pushing forward, but not, I didn't feel full of hope. I felt like a little bit full of fight. So
that's a good way to put it.
I will say I did get a hopeful feeling from this story, if only because I was sort of buoyed by Tish's eternal optimism, and Sharon's optimism. That like they were just continuing to put their nose to the grindstone and do whatever they could to get Fonny out of prison. And it was sort of like, like we're going to get him out. Like this, we have to. And they weren't defeatist in their actions, even though it didn't always seem optimistic. I felt that like Tish really, it's almost like this new life inside of her was feeding her optimism. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get Fonny out of jail.
Yeah.
So And I think the way that it ends leaves, I mean, Baldwin's such a master, he leaves you with a lot of questions at the end about what's going to happen to this family, but I was sort of like hopeful a little bit. But that's
Emily.
Why it's like
Emily
cool.
says she agrees with you.
Really?
Yeah, it felt hopeful to me just because it doesn't end definitively.
Oh, cool, Emily.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. We'll see. So Emily's typing in her comments on the Facebook Live.
Yes.
So if you guys want to chime in, we'd love to hear your questions as you hear ours.
Yeah.
So another thing I really want to touch on, which Erin, you brought up, is Baldwin's non-linear storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Elaborate on what you were thinking about sort of the way he lays out the story, which is not A to Z.
Yeah, so we get bits and pieces constantly. We're put in moments in characters' lives or certain scenes, and then we're taken back again to give us more info, but it never unfolds as it actually happened. And I was wondering, if that made it difficult to understand their story, if that made it difficult to stay engaged, if that made it difficult to think that this was real and like to kind of understand what was happening. But I was thinking that this way of storytelling actually allowed characters to really like stick out more, because we really get these dedicated times of understanding why they are the way that they are, or why they respond in ways that they do, or like how they got here. And so I think that makes the characters, not just Tish and Fonny, but their parents, everyone. I think it makes everyone have like a much clearer kind of like character profile. So I really loved that, and I love that style of writing, and it kind of, to me, it makes it easier to really like keep going with the book and read it all in kind of like one sitting, because you just want to know what's going to happen,
right?
And you're like craving info.
Yeah, you're like eager to figure out, how did they get there? Like we don't have all of the information at the beginning, which I think is, I mean, this is so masterful of Baldwin, right? There's no way that I could ever tell a story like this, but he gives us nuggets of information when we most need them, I think, and allows us to have that energy of storytelling and discovery.
I love non-linear narratives when they're done properly.
Yes,
I don't like to be jumping back and forth when it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But I think that it was done so well here, and I think that it actually made the whole story more powerful, because when you contrast the present with the past and you just see immediately the differences in how things changed, I feel like that just is incredible to me, and I think it made it that much more impactful as a whole.
So I know we posed this question on Facebook, and we got some great responses from you guys, but what was the most emotional part of the novel for you, and what was the most shocking? So I will go first with the most shocking, which for me was the slap heard round the world. In Tish's family's living room, Fonny's family comes over to hear the news of this baby. And, Fonny's mother says some really extremely hurtful things. Now, this is supposed to be a godly woman. She's very religious, supposed to be very tuned into Christ. And yet she doesn't act like that at all. She says some extremely hurtful things about this baby and about Tish and about her own son, Fonny, in jail. And Frank, Fonny's dad, slaps her across the face. So that leads into what you guys were talking about earlier about these gender roles that felt very dated. But to me, the slap did not equal, you should just not ever lay hands on anyone else. Yeah, exactly. So even though what she was saying was repulsive, I was still very taken aback by that. And her daughters sort of crowd around her and help her, and it's almost like they've been here before. But what about you? Did you guys have a shocking part or a most emotional part?
Honestly, the whole book was really emotional for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were some moments where I was like, whoa, this is a lot to take in. I thought that two of the most emotional parts for me were when Tish announced she was pregnant to her family.
To her
and
mom.
their love and acceptance was just so overwhelming.
I know.
And I mean, I love her parents. They're amazing. And then the second part of the book that really stood out to me was when Sharon went to Puerto Rico and found Fonny's accuser, Victoria, and tried to speak to her on Fonny's behalf. And I just, when she broke down in front of her, that really got to me. And I think that was the most devastating moment for me. In the novel. Yeah.
Oh, God. Sharon. I mean, let's have a moment for Sharon.
Sharon, we
She
love you.
was my favorite character. And, I mean, it's just no contest about my favorite character is Sharon. But sticking with most emotional moments and most shocking, Erin, what stood out to you in terms of those?
So it's this scene at the end of the book where I can actually read it.
Oh, yes. We're going to have a read-along.
Yay.
It's where Joseph is telling Frank that, Fonny probably won't be getting out of jail because Victoria had been taken away. And Adrian and Fonny's other sister, whose name I can't think of right now, they're gossiping in the other room, and they're irritating the men because they're talking about something very grave, and those two girls are gossiping, and then Frank yells at them and says these awful sexist, terrible things. But that really wasn't what shocked me. It was, I guess, Joseph's point of view, and it's on page 190 of our copy, but it says, Joseph watches the daughters. He sees something very strange, something he had never thought of. He sees that Adrian loves her father with a really desperate love. She knows he is in pain. She would soothe it if she could. She does not know how. She would give anything to know how. She does not know that she reminds Frank of her mother. And then a few pages down, then Joseph sees that Frank loves his daughters. And that to me was probably one of the saddest moments of the book, just because I think this happens with people in general, but just this inability for people to show and express love to those who are closest to them, regardless of just this story, any story. That's a very, I think, powerful sentiment and an unfortunate reality with parents and children and husbands and wives and friends and siblings. It's just something that when you see that happen, and see all the space that's in between two people, but
people who once loved each other too.
Or want to love each other. That to me really made me sad. I think because it felt everyone in the world had either seen or maybe experienced that, or just it felt very timeless.
It's a sad reality. Yeah.
One of the things that I was really surprised by the amount of emotion I had was the woman who owns the grocery store standing up for Tish and for Fonny. And to me, that really exhibited earliest form of allyship is to say, as a white woman saying, I saw this, these two are not lying, they are in the right. Yes. She was grabbed by this guy.
Yeah, using your privilege to really point out an injustice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I found myself teary at those pages, yes, go, girl.
She was so cute, too.
She was.
Yes.
I know. Okay, so this gets us to sort of our conversation. I know we were talking about it earlier about, and I'm going to combine these two questions because I actually think they work well together, is do you think there was a hero or a heroine of this book? And if so, who was it? And then I also think that lends itself to talking about the amount that the sort of supporting characters added to this book.
Yes.
What did these secondary characters add to the story progression? And perhaps is one of them really the hero or the
Right,
heroine?
right.
So Jess, take it away. What do you think about this?
So this is kind of hard, but I think for me, there were several heroes in this book. I would say Sharon is one, Tish, Fonnie, Ernestine, Frank, etc. So I think like there's no one hero for a reason.
Okay.
Because community is super important, and that no one of these people could get by without the other. And I think that was obvious between Tish and Fonnie, but even more beautiful between Tish and Sharon, and Tish and her sister, and just Fonnie and his father, and so I think that everyone was a hero in their own right. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Erin?
I definitely agree. I think like everyone in the story that acts as a way to help Tish and Fonnie, like whether it's their families or Pedro or Levy, the old woman. I think it's Baldwin's way of showing that like the difficulties that Tish and Fonnie face are so like catastrophic and so massive that like it takes people like to help make tiny steps to kind of fight those things. Because they're not things that can be solved by two people, that can be taken on by two people's strengths. Like they have to deal with race, class, gender.
There's so many things coming at them.
So every little moment of like kindness, it helps fuel their whole story forward. And I think that it's very important that it does take a actual group.
Takes a village. Isn't that a saying?
Yeah. Definitely. And that reminds me of what we were talking earlier, which is for Tish's family, they view family as being inclusive. And so, okay, Fonnie, you're part of the family. You're part of the family.
Yeah.
You're in. Exactly. Like, okay, Frank, you're Fonnie's dad, you're in our family. This unborn baby, you're in the family. And for Fonnie's family, it's an exclusive family. And even if you're biologically in the family, you might not even be considered to be part of the family.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a juxtaposition against that idea of community, the way that each of these families view what does family mean.
Yeah.
And like also on like a side note, that's kind of something that I love, like the whole like secondary cast, because I feel like especially when you grow up in a big city or in a town where you just make it a point to know the people in your town, city, however big your space is, they start to have an impact on your story. Like whether you will think of it or not, like if you start to frequent certain places and just like walk certain paths, like people will have an impact on your life, and they can help make you either happier or not. So that was definitely something, as I was thinking how important it is in life to like really reach out to the people that you are coming in contact with. In big and in small ways. So I thought that was a beautiful thing, and I think in the film that was really nicely like shown as well. You loved every like secondary character.
Yeah.
You really you just loved them.
Even the ones that were on the screen for like a few minutes.
Exactly.
You know.
Well, let's talk about the movie because we've each seen it, and it's nominated for some awards.
Yes.
Regina
King.
Yeah,
Yes, Regina King won a Golden Globe for her role as Sharon, Tish's mom, and she won Best Supporting Actress, which major applause. Regina, I hope you're tuning in right now. We loved you. And so let's talk about the movie. I thought it was gorgeously shot.
Yes.
Agreed.
I thought the light, the way that it flowed across the scenes,
the production was like amazing.
The soundtrack and
the soundtrack.
And
yes.
I think like Barry Jenkins and Nicholas, I can't remember his last name, but the man who composed the soundtrack, they worked together. So they're clearly like a magical pairing in the sense
that like they get what each other is
style.
putting down. Yeah.
So I think that definitely like enhanced the overall film.
Yeah. Totally. And I thought for 98% of the movie, it stayed so true to the
So
book.
true. Like the dialogue was exactly the same.
Scenes, it was like, especially the scene when Tish tells Sharon that she's pregnant, or
Yes.
rather, Sharon picks up on.
She knows her
She's always
motherly
totally.
instinct.
So I thought that was so true to the book. And then
Yeah.
the movie deviates away from the book in the last few scenes.
So this is a spoiler. If you haven't seen it or read it,
Plug
don't
your ears.
don't listen.
Yeah. But there is a scene in the movie that's the last scene where we see Tish give birth to the baby, which is not explicitly said
yeah.
at the end of the book. And then we see maybe 5 years down the road,
Yeah.
Tish and the little boy, turns out, we never
It was a
know
boy.
this from
Yep.
James Baldwin, but they go visit Fonnie in prison.
Yes.
So, whoa, that tells us a lot that
Mm-hmm.
James Baldwin did not tell us. It says that Fonnie, that they had the trial and he didn't get out.
Yep.
Or maybe they never had the trial, I don't know. It says that this little boy is a boy, and so it's almost like, okay, here's the next generation of
Here's
black
Fonnie
men.
number 2.
Exactly,
Yeah.
who are growing up, with his father incarcerated.
Yep.
I was dumbfounded by this. Why do you guys think that the movie ended like this? Do you think that moviegoers needed that point of resolution?
Well, I think Barry Jenkins definitely took a few instances of, like he definitely changed some things, not just the ending, but we don't see what happens to Frank in the film, and
Yes.
I actually saw the film first and then read the book, so I was even more surprised when reading, 'cause
okay.
I was like, I never knew. Or Daniel's story in prison, like that doesn't nearly get drawn out in the way that in the book it's like really awful and terrible when you find out what happens to him, and how much like he serves as like a character foil for Fonnie, because like he tells Fonnie things that are going to depict Fonnie's like very like his future, which is chilling to think about. So I don't know if like from a film point of view, it's too like it would be difficult to show some of those things, or if it's deemed like too much. I don't know. I think this happens a lot with like books and film. Things get taken out that sometimes can feel like the crux of the story, and it can feel almost like untrue to kind of take that away from the characters. But yeah, I think it definitely, the film ended on a much more hopeful note. So
Yes.
I felt hopeful. I felt like, oh, wow. But almost like when I read the book after, it was like coming down and realizing, like, oh, that's not what happened. Like we don't really know what happened. Like anything could have happened to any of those characters.
Yeah,
We don't
exactly. How did you feel about the exclusion of Frank's suicide in the movie?
I think it kind of undermined his character a little bit, because like I think in the book in general, Frank is a much more, like he's one of the more, I don't want to say sensitive, but like he shows his feelings.
He's so
a lot.
complex.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
which is of course natural because his son is in prison, like his only son.
Yeah.
So even just like they took out like bits and pieces of Frank crying and just like showing some very real like portrayals of his feelings, and then him choosing to end his life. Like I think it didn't show us all that there was to Frank. It didn't show all that Baldwin had written for Frank. So
Yeah, it sort of shortchanged him. All we see from him in the movie is this sort of burst of anger, and then he's going to go get drunk with Tish's dad.
Yeah.
Which it feels very flat
Yeah.
compared to how Baldwin wrote him, which is very complex and flawed and real.
Yeah, I feel like he gives you more to think about in the book, whereas in the movie, his character is kind of just cut short.
Yeah.
But yeah, and even how he got caught stealing, and he would have probably faced time in prison as well, and he didn't want to live that life, and like I think that was super powerful as well.
Yeah.
And just so we know, Carol Sheets, hi Carol,
Hi,
are you
Carol.
still watching? She said that she did not like the ending of the book because it angered her and it made her so sad because that injustice should not exist. So that's something we felt as well.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
And another question that we got from Emily Hershey before we went live is, what do you think of Sharon's journey to Puerto Rico, and did we think it was realistic? So we were talking about this before. Thanks for that question,
Yeah,
Emily.
very good question.
Not really realistic,
Yeah.
I want to say. I mean, just when you think about, like, what are the odds of her locating this woman? All she has is a picture of her. She's got her sort of general neighborhood, and she's got her sort of ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
That's not a lot to go on.
No.
And she manages to find a knock on the right door, Victoria's home. They end up having this
Happens
heart
to
to
be
heart.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, just to be allowed to be a single woman in this music club, to find this driver who shepherds her through and, like, waits in his cab for her. It just felt like...
It felt like that,
far-fetched.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that would actually happen. Like, those series of events happening in that way is very, like, not realistic. But
I also felt that, to me, that was the most propulsive part of the story.
Yeah.
Like, when Sharon gets on the plane to go, I started turning pages even
Yes.
faster.
Yes.
So for Baldwin to really, like, pick up the story, I think that is the height of the conflict of, like, what's going to happen. And is she going to find her?
Yes.
So...
And Emily's watching right now.
Emily.
And she said, I guess to add on to that, does it matter if it's realistic?
Yeah.
So I don't think it does.
No.
I think that, like you said, it was actually a really, like, propulsive point of the book, and it made me keep reading, so.
Yeah, and I think we needed that energy of Sharon behind, like, there's nothing I can do while Fonny's in jail, but wait, there is this one thing, this sort of
Yes.
shot in the dark that I can take.
And I liked that she didn't convince Victoria to change her stance, that it wasn't some magical thing that Sharon did going over there and it just worked out. Like, I like that she went for a reason and she didn't accomplish what she set out to do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And even, like, I would say her coming back was more impactful, because I think there's
Yes.
a line, I can't remember exactly in the book, but there's a line where I think she had maybe just got off the plane and was telling her family what happened and how awful it was. And there's this moment, I think, where Tish looks at her mother and realizes, like, how young her mother is, or, like, kind of sees her as, like, a person, not just, like, a mother figure. And that stuck out to me for sure. I think people in general, when they realize that their parents are people, it's like it's a weird thought. But yeah, I think her coming back signaled a new era. Like, it signaled something had shifted in all of their stories. So.
Yeah. Well, we are so glad that you guys read If Beale Street Could Talk with us this month of January. Thank you so much for tuning in and reading with us. This video will stay around for a while, so if you missed us live, be sure to watch and read this anytime. It doesn't need to be
highly
this
recommend.
month. You haven't missed your chance. And exciting news, stay with us and read our next book for February, which is going to be Kindred by Octavia Butler. So you guys voted, and we're so glad that you did. So we'll see you back here in a month when we do our Facebook Live chat for Kindred.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.